Okay, welcome to the program, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. I'm doing sort of a bit of a departure tonight from the usual political conversation. I've got Bryan Agurcia here. He is a personal trainer. He is a coach, a health coach, who specializes in working with people like me who are getting older. So before we go there, Bryan, I want you to just talk a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. Um, my background, probably the thing that I think most relevant is I have a master's in gerontology. Um, I want to be clear as to what that means because I don't want to step on the toes of medicine. So gerontology is the study of all the different facets of aging. Not only the physical, the social, emotional, spiritual, cognitive. It's a study of all those things. Geriatrics is obviously the branch of medicine that deals with aging. And typically, some people have joked around, but there's a lot of truth to it. Geriatrics is just about trying to hold everything together before it completely breaks down. Mm-hmm. So that's my background. I think it relevant to our conversation or to any conversation related to aging today is a science that started in about 2010. It's called geroscience. Mm-hmm. And it was established to study the biology of aging and all of the diseases that we typically relate to the process of aging.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to know that there are some cutting edge thinkers and planners in this important topic, obviously because I'm there myself. After I got into my early 60s, I started to think about the future as I enter into, as Shakespeare says, the shuffling off the mortal coil. Not that I hope it happens anytime soon. However, I wanted to figure out how to preserve and improve my own health, my own vitality, my energy level, my acuity, my looks, everything, my my immunity, so that I could prolong my life and be around long enough so that maybe I could know my grandchildren and all the things that we live for. And so I really began to zero in on how to do this. And then I met you briefly after my daughter kind of put me up to the idea that I should be going to a gym and working out. And she's like, you can't do this. You look at you, you're flabby. You don't have the ability. So I was like, you want to bet? So I went to the gym and I videoed myself lifting weights and sent it to her. And I said, you see, I can do this. And while I was there, I really kind of took to it. And now I have enough in me to go an average of 5 times a week. And so far, so good. I will tell you, I'm concerned over how long my stick-with-itness still. I mean, I've been doing it now for about 3 months, and I've seen some pretty dramatic changes. I met you there. I've consulted with you casually about what I'm trying to figure out here. And so I thought I'd have you on to talk about all aspects of a plan, with the idea that my listeners could benefit from it, regardless of your age, and how to go about things. So, Bryan, the first question I have is that I went to the gym today, but I barely made it. I was like, oh, I can't go. I don't feel like going, even to the point where I pulled into the parking lot and I was like, oh, I don't feel like going in. And I sort of was looking at TikToks, I was like doing all these other distractions, but I was able to haul myself in. And once I'm in there, I'm pretty much okay. Although I didn't feel totally energized today, and I kind of therefore just did some lighter things. But I guess I'm worried about, whether I have enough gas in the tank, so to speak, to really do this thing in the long term. And I'm sure you've noticed that a lot of people might start out really gung-ho about it, and even like me, stay in it for several months, but then they kind of fall apart. So what advice do you have to kind of really take this on? Because my hope is that I can take this on for the rest of my life.
Anybody can take it on. And I'm just going to suggest that I'll give you an example. I'm going to guess you and many of your listeners have been planning, hopefully, for their financial health for years.
Yes.
Right? And if you didn't and you don't, some of us are going to think in the United States, you're dumb, you're stupid, you didn't plan. And for other reasons, people might not be able to plan or save. They're just living paycheck to paycheck. So in my fantasy, I have approached financial planners and said, it doesn't make any sense to me if in your assets and liabilities column, you don't have you in the assets column. Because if you don't think of it that way, then at some point, I don't need to have any training in finance to know if you don't pay attention to this asset today, I can guarantee that at some point in the future, you will be using the other assets to pay for what has become a liability, right? Because you chose, or we don't think of it in our culture as this is an asset, I can do things to take care of it. Because I live in a country that has a reactive healthcare system, not one that thinks about how can I make this thing improve over time. So what would I do? First of all, I would rearrange your mental furniture and go, okay, this is yours. It's your responsibility. And it's not going to be easy, period, like today and what you did.
Yeah.
So I would say that what happened today is totally okay. And if you didn't go in, you're not dumb, you're not stupid, you're none of those things. There is no way that every human is going to go to the gym 5 days a week from now until X in the future. It's not going to happen.
Right.
More realistic would be listen to the ebbs and flow, and they'll average out over time if you continually put at the top of your mind, I have to take care of this thing. The medical community is not going to do it. My mommy and daddy are not going to do it. My daughter is not responsible for my well-being.
Right.
So it has to be a switching of the mental furniture. And it can be done, right? Because most people, in my professional opinion, are walking around with ideas about aging that are at least 50 years old and not anywhere near what geroscience has learned today in 2025, right? So it's a rearrangement of furniture, mental furniture, and going, okay, those ideas are outdated. Okay, just throw them out the door, start from a clean sheet design, and realize we can improve with each passing year.
Well, one of the things you said resonates with me in that, the idea of putting together retirement investments, and that's something that I've done and I'm working on because I want to have, along with my wife, a good, comfortable retirement. And when I go into the gym, I think of that as an investment. Every time I go in, I am investing by improving my body, my health, because all of these exercises I'm doing, and I will get into that in a minute, that's going to help me stay healthy and more disease-free, hopefully, longer. And therefore, I'll be able to enjoy my retirement rather than, not paying attention. And then I've known of cases, and probably you have too, where you have somebody who has a lot of assets, but they don't have good health when they get to that age, so they can't enjoy it. And they might have to end up kicking the bucket and someone else enjoys it. So, if you want to be serious about retirement and about health, you have to look at it as an investment. You have to look at it as something that, is part of your overall function and job, really, in a sense. So, it's a very kind of almost a career approach to working out. Now, I want to talk about what I'm doing. The first thing I do when I get in is I do like cardio. Now, I've seen different people have said, well, don't do that first, whatever, but that's what I do. And that involves the treadmill for me. And the way I get through it is I usually listen to a podcast while I'm treadmilling. Lately, I've been actually reading because I have course study in my college courses I'm taking. So I'm actually reading text. And that actually is interesting because I set the speed a little lower so I don't fall over while I'm reading, but I'm on longer and I build up more of a calorie count while I'm on it. So that's where I start. And then I go downstairs and I do a couple of these. I like to do a little boxing with the punching bag just to get out some aggression. And I then do kettlebell. I seem to be attracted to that because I find that it's very free flowing and I can like whip it. I have different routines I'm doing on that. And then if I still am cranking at that point, and often I am, I'll go and do either a bench press or I'll do the barbells. And I do different routines for the upper body. And then finally, I go through the stations, as I call it, like the stations of the cross, except in this case, it's the leg piece and the different, functions, just to make sure that I've exercised everything. And I don't keep close track of what I'm doing weight-wise, but I do try to make sure that it's vigorous. And depending on how I'm feeling, I might go right up to fail, or I might just count them out. And then after that, that's usually about 30 to 35 minutes in the downstairs part. And then I'm doing steam room, sauna, and cold plunge. And then I'm done. What say you?
So your listeners should know that we haven't talked about this at length the way you just described.
Right.
So I need to tell you, and I need to let everybody know, I have a very unique approach to taking care and improving human performance over time. Okay. So this is where I would start. I would take everything you just said, throw it out with the baby, with the bathwater, with everything. Why, Bryan? You're so drastic. I'm not drastic. I want to make certain that we build in, I start quoting Mr. Warren Buffett, after the age of 50, we should build a margin of safety with each passing year, because something you said earlier in terms of somebody's quality of life and they kick the bucket, there is something worse than death. A financial planner friend of mine said, I said, do tell, disability.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And disability goes up, most likely, at least linear, maybe even exponential, if you go into a gym, which most people do, and I feel good today, or I feel bad, and you don't take into account all your weak spots. Here's what I would have said. I don't know anything else about what happened today, right? But I would have said, how do you feel? I'm not feeling great. Either you're stressed, you're fatigued, your sleep was compromised, you're thinking of X. If you are running below average, the chances are high you're going to get hurt. And if you get hurt, sorry, take the equation, throw it out. Now we have to go to another set of equations, which mean I have to go to a doc because I injured myself, etc. So I wouldn't walk anywhere near it to do something that stresses the body. Where you're going, Bryan, you got to overcome the hump. Not if you look at the long game. In my head, once you're over 50, you should be building a margin of safety each year a little bit more. Because if you get hurt at 50, 60, 70, 80, coming back is pure evil, depending on the severity of the injury. Even so, I say to people, should we be getting hurt at the same rate as the little people 50 and younger? No. Why? Because by now we should have the wisdom that says somewhere, don't get hurt. There should not be 75-year-olds getting hurt. They will, but if you walk in with a certain attitude, the probabilities of getting hurt go way, way down. That's one. That's one. So I would have never even got in. Let's say you got past that one and you did the things you described. What would I start with? I would start with the idea that the joints are mission critical, and let's just pretend you've got some issue, like most people over 50, and your right hip just isn't right. Then you focus on the weak spot, see how it's doing that day, because it changes every damn day based on what you did or didn't do, and focus on making certain that as you're doing everything, you're doing, this is something I used to do when I raced. I used to pretend I had a MRI going up and down me while I raced. And if I noticed anything, I would stop if necessary or assess and say to myself, is it important enough that I need to stop what I'm doing, or can I continue racing? Right? So that's just part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you might say, well, that's a lot of stuff to do. It's nothing compared to what you're going to have to do if you get hurt.
Yes.
Now, you might say, well, I'm not going to get hurt. I go, so now you have the same damn crystal ball as the Wicked Witch did in The Wizard of Oz, and you can tell the damn future. So you're going, that's a little extreme. I go, it requires that level of vigilance to not get hurt, to build in safety. That's something that I just don't see people doing. And if somebody says, I'm not going to get hurt, I go, it's okay. Right. I would do that with the only asset that I have, because I don't have a backup body, unless I'm Dr. Frankenstein. I don't have a backup. And if I don't pay attention to it, I don't expect my doctor to come running, because he's just worried. He's just going to take care of me once I've broken it. Right. So it's a very different, I'm in a different ballpark, probably in another planet, because it's mission critical not to get hurt. It's Warren Buffett. Don't lose what you have. And if you do have this, do the best, but always leave a little margin of safety. And that margin should keep growing with each passing year. And it should be directly proportional to whatever injuries or things are going on or have happened in the past.
You know, I'm glad you've mentioned this, because, you know, you're right. I mean, you have to kind of think about where you are in any given day and what you're capable of doing, given how you're feeling. And I know that, like, for today, I didn't do all that much because I wasn't feeling well, but I did something. I mean, I definitely, you know, maybe went through about a third of the routine. And also, I think when you get to be my age, and you're right in that there are certain things that are problematic, and you should know about that. Like in my case, I mean, I do not want to injure my knees because my knees don't feel great. So I avoid certain exercises. I'm not going to do squats too much, maybe a little bit, just, you know, with a lot of awareness, because I know that if I knock out my knee, I'm going to be in big trouble. You know, it's like when a horse loses its leg. I mean, they have to shoot the horse. You know, it's like you have to kind of look at it as what you're capable of doing at this stage in your life. And also, I sometimes suffer from, I guess you'd say, vertigo. I get dizzy. So I don't lie flat on the floor. I don't do any of those. And when I'm on the bench press, I put it at an angle, so I'm not lying down flat. And so you learn to compensate for your various weaknesses when you do this, and you have to know what those are. You're right, because otherwise I could end up falling flat on my you-know-what and being hurt. And I think that if I, do those things and I learn to compensate for my weaknesses, then I'm in a position where I can get stronger in that regard. I mean, my knees will improve, my dizziness will reduce, which it has. And I think that in a sense, but I'm approaching it from a realistic standpoint at this point, in terms of actually looking at what it is that's appropriate for me, and that we're all unique in that way.
May I comment?
Please.
So notice I didn't answer your question about what you asked about your whole workout, because I meant what I said, which is if we start from a safety standpoint, right, then everything is very, very, very different. Everything is different. Therefore, just the workout, I don't know something critical there. How is your sleeping pattern? Well, what do you want to know about my sleeping? Because you're breaking down the muscle when you're training. And in order to build muscle, which we didn't talk about this, but this is a basic statistic. On average, humans start losing about 1% of muscle starting at 30. Once you get to 50, that number inflects up to about 3% average per year. So by the time you're 60, you've lost 50% of your muscle. Nobody talks about that, right? So that means that people are going to train their bodies to try to do the same thing we're doing X number of years back, minus the muscle that's necessary to do that. So what does that mean, Brian? Why are you telling me this? That means that if you have less muscle at joint A that you did 5 years ago, you're asking or putting the same demands. And if there's not enough muscle, who's going to do the work? It's going to be compensated at another muscle, and the joint is going to take more stress, and the probabilities go up that you get hurt. And what are you going to say if you get hurt? It happened because of my age, because that's the easiest thing to say. It's way harder to think ahead and go, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Why don't we train this much, sleep this much, put in enough protein? It's simple in that it's a complex problem from my perspective. It's not, when people tell me I go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, there's no disrespect to you or to anybody. To me, I hear Charlie Brown's teacher, right? Wah, 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 wah. I don't know what that means, because I need to put it into the context. What else are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish? And what margin of safety do you have built in so you don't get hurt, or at least mitigate and minimize the probabilities of getting hurt, which I rarely meet anybody or many people who do what I'm suggesting. That's why I'm here, hopefully talking to you and talking to people and going, there's something out there that's different.
No, I mean, I want to try to talk about that. And you mentioned like the loss of muscle. That's something that's important. I know that when I started this, my main focus was to lose weight. I started to gain, I became overweight maybe when I was in my probably early 40s. My work became more sedentary, but my diet didn't change. And my metabolism probably started to go down. And I went into this thing with the idea that I wanted to lose weight. I have lost some weight, but I'm now thinking that it's more important for me to convert fat to muscle rather than lose weight at my age. And I think that I've started to do that, in that my weight has been pretty consistent. I initially lost about 5 or 6 pounds, and since then I've kind of just maintained that state. But I have noticed that my muscle is going up. I feel like I can actually feel the muscles go up. So I think that that's probably a good a good track for me to be on. Now, you mentioned some of these other factors, protein, diet, sleep. I wanted to talk about that because you have to look at the whole person. And in my case, the diet still is not there. I mean, maybe I'm looking for a trick. I'm looking for a gimmick, but something that I did was I downloaded an app. It wasn't expensive. I'll say what it is, the Califit. It costs like $50 a year to track my calories and to track my protein, my fat, and what it does is I think it uses artificial intelligence to literally scan what it is I'm about to eat and then put in this kind of data. It's obviously not exact. But one of the side products of doing this has been that I feel ashamed. It's like I'm not going to go out and have that gigantic piece of chocolate cake because I don't want to tell the app. I don't want to scan it. It's like, and plus, in the beginning, when I first applied for the app, it interviewed me and it determined how many calories I should have in the course of a day. And I try to see if I can make sure that by the end of the day, there's a deficit, even if it's not all that much. And that when I go in to work out and when I do the treadmill, it increases because I have it linked to my walk app in the smartphone, whatever they call that. And it actually increases the number of calories I can have. So, that's another weird incentive for me to do this. I mean, maybe it's me, I don't know, but I tend to become very metric oriented in many ways. I look at a lot of, metrics throughout, in the course of a day. I look at how many book sales I've had that day. I could look at that. I could look at how many hits I've had on my various platforms. I mean, how many listeners, whatnot. So it kind of is consistent with other things that I look at in the course of a day, data that I look at. But the actual diet itself, I'd like to talk about, in that should I not be oriented toward having more of a protein-oriented diet and less carbohydrates, certainly less sugar? What is your philosophy on that?
Well, I'm going to say that I don't have any other qualifications according to the law to make any statement on this.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say there's something that we have to say, and it has to be said at the beginning, way at the beginning. That is, my answer would be, depends on what you want, Chuck. So you said earlier, and by the way, notice the pattern. Every time you said something, I take it and tease it apart and see it from a different perspective.
Right.
I want to lose weight, right? Again, I hear Charlie Brown's teacher. When I answer to people, I go, that it sounds beautiful. It sounds wonderful. But if you're over 50 and you're losing muscle, which you probably are, getting it back is pure hell. Keeping it is hell to the third power. Right. Because it's work to put on muscle. So my question would be, why do you want to lose muscle? Lose fat. Okay, that's cool. Well, how do I do that, Brian? They have equipment where you can measure, you look at your body composition, right? And then you can follow it over time. I don't know of people who want to lose muscle, especially if they know anything about the process of aging. So that's where I would start first, is losing weight doesn't mean anything in my book. It hasn't since we know how to pay attention to look at body composition, which we can do at a fairly cheap rate. So that would be number one. Again, it depends on what you want. The research shows, as I said earlier, we're losing all of these percentages, or at least by 50, by 60, we've lost about 50% of muscle. So if we all agree with that, or somebody says, no, I go to the gym, I haven't lost as much, so that's okay. You can play with those numbers. All I know is typically we're running at a deficit, and I have zero problem saying as a professional and my reputation that the majority of people, unless you're a freak of nature, are going to be running in the red with respect to losing muscle, and they are not going to come anywhere near close to eating the right amount of food, plus getting the appropriate quality of sleep to build the muscle that is necessary to keep your quality of life at a high level. Well, why are you so negative, Brian? It requires a certain level of discipline to sit down at every meal and think, I got to get this amount by the end of today. Well, why? Why don't I just, save it up for tomorrow? The clock resets every damn night. You got to do it again tomorrow and the day after that. Now, it's not fun. There's no joy, none of that from my perspective, but the return on investment puts you way, way ahead of your peers, way ahead, right? So that's part of my answer is eating protein should be a way of living, right? It should be a way of living. Now remember, I'm saying if you want a high quality of life, if you believe as I get older, it equals disease and disability, then we don't need to have a conversation. The data is all out there. The research is there. Some people in the area actually have said the words now since 2012, we can actually reverse aging. That depends on how you define it, right? But if you've lost X amount of muscle and you put it back on, you reversed aging, right? So you put the muscle back on that you've lost. Mind you, I'll repeat it. It is hard to keep it on. It takes meticulous paying attention to. And if you think that or somebody in big pharma is going to give you a drug and voila, keep dreaming, because we're not anywhere near close to something like that, right?
No, I understand. We all want to have like some kind of a pill.
That's very USA, but good old fashioned hard work is still here to stay.
Right. So, the goal then, in a sense, because I want to preserve muscle for as long as I can, and and it's hell to try to regain once you lose it, is to generally maintain a higher protein diet and cut back on the carbs, cut back on the sugar, if not eliminate it.
Yes and no. I'm hesitating because every body is unique and every day changes, right? If you are out walking on a hot day in summer, which here typically is June or July, and you are not paying attention to putting in more protein and taking in more fluids, it varies. Again, there should be a feedback loop. That should be part of the way that we think every day. But Bryan, I can't do that every day. It's okay. It's okay if you miss it here and there, but it should be part of our daily MO.
Yes, and I have tried to orient myself a bit more toward protein and think about what are the foods that have the highest protein?
Typically they are what I would call flesh, right? Animals,
especially red
animals. Animals. No, there's red meat, there's fish, there's fowl, and there's beans. I want to bring up a book I read a long time ago, who I can't remember the author right now. It's called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. I'm going to give my little tiny comment. This gentleman was a dentist who was practicing, I think, in the mid 30s, and he noticed this exponential growth in people who were coming in with cavities, and he believed that there was a link to it with what people were eating. So he was a man apparently of wealth. He gave up his practice, went around the world and looked at all the indigenous or many indigenous groups of people. And he had sort of like the ultimate research test. He looked at the same family and the older kids were typically eating the indigenous foods, and the younger kids were eating the typical standard American diet, processed foods, etc. And one of the things he noticed is you could actually see physical changes in facial structure, jaw structure, propensity towards getting sick on the people who were eating the standard American diet compared to all the people who were eating the indigenous foods. That was in the children. Mm-hmm. But what I wanted to say is no group of indigenous people were completely vegetarian. That did not exist. The closest was some people who drank, the blood of an animal. That was it. But typically, again, unless you are super anal, it is very improbable that you'll get all the protein that you'll need by strictly eating non-meat sources. You could try, and it sounds valiant, right? I'm not going to eat flesh. That's okay. But don't even come close to thinking I'm going to get everything I need for this thing to perform at a high level as I get older. Okay, that's
Right.
right.
Plus, I understand that having meat and that can include like a good number of eggs in the morning and etc. It actually tends to satiate you, and it sort of builds a certain strength and endurance. And we're told that these things are not healthy, but that's really not true.
The study that came out that said that, people could look it up. I forget the years. Dr. Ansel Keys, who's supposedly called the father of exercise physiology, which happens to be my first degree, he did a study, and he was very influential. He could schmooze. He took about 20 countries, and his hypothesis was high-fat diets have a negative effect on human body cardiovascular. So this is what he did. And actually, this was on the cover of Time magazine. Something, it has butter. I think it was a big stick of butter that was on the front cover talking about this particular story. Maybe it was in 2011, 12, 13, somewhere in there. And what he did was he threw out all the countries that didn't agree with his hypothesis, which is common for some researchers. And he only kept the countries that agreed with his hypothesis, which backed it up. While many people at the time thought, many research scientists strongly disagreed, but the fact that, he was a great schmoozer, he could convince people. So people have been misbelieving that forever and ever. And people could say, well, fat is bad. Well, we've been eating low fat since the 70s, and we're the most obese country on the planet.
Yeah,
so
I remember that the whole low fat fad kind of seemed.
I did it too. I was guilty.
It was a big promotional campaign, and it does seem to correlate with an increase in obesity, heart disease, cancers. That, and then they throw in seed oil and polyunsaturated fats, which are not real, and the body can't digest them.
Yeah, like or sugar.
Sugar went into everything, and in the form of corn syrup, and they put that stuff in everything. Yeah. That all of these things contributed. I think that it was like actually in the late 60s that they got. I read this somewhere, but former President Eisenhower agreed to try the low-fat diet because that was what they were promoting at the time. And shortly after he did, he died. Not that that caused it, but I'm just saying that it's, to have a normal fat diet is healthy.
The indigenous people in this area or the Northeast, when the Pilgrims came, knew, because of having been here for so long and having the experience, that one could not survive by eating rabbits during the winter. Why? Because they're all protein and they have no fat, right? Whereas the Pilgrims didn't know that, and of course, they didn't think highly of the indigenous people, so many of them ended up in a very compromised state, maybe even death, because they didn't pay attention to that. In that, again, going back to that book and that whole system, humans have been eating foods, all different parts of animals, right? In my Latino culture, my parents were poor. So what do poor people eat? They eat the whole damn cow. I mean, brains, stomach, kidneys, etc. In most cultures that ate animals, they were aware that all of the organs were more important and the actual muscle was, right, secondary.
I've heard that, like, for example, when animals will kill an animal in the wild, they don't really touch the muscle. They eat all the organ meat.
Yeah.
Because they
So,
instinctively know, like the liver and the kidney and everything, that's where the ultimate highest protein is.
not protein, but probably different concentrations of different vitamins, minerals, etc. Now,
Yeah.
as soon as you say that, right, no doubt there are listeners who are going to say, but the high fat, etc., there, it causes problems. I'm not here to start going back and forth.
Right.
I'm just highly aware that people who are indigenous, I don't need any more random double-blind studies. I just got to look at what people have been doing for thousands of years all over the earth without talking to each other and realize this is what you do if you want to survive. If you don't want to, then do something different.
Right. I mean, that's an excellent study. I mean, I also read somewhere that the people who have the longest lifespan apparently are in the Caucasus, Armenians, Georgians, and that one of the unique things about their diet is that there's a lot of yogurt and dairy products.
Here's what I'll go back when you said that. One of the things that's critical that you have not talked about that the research has shown is all of the indigenous peoples that I referred to earlier, all of them had a form of fermented food, which is what you just referred to. Now, fast forward to 2025, unless you're one of a group of people, certain groups of people, I'll have Korea, kimchi, right? Sauerkraut, yogurt, right? But for most peoples, nobody eats that, whereas the research shows that what happens in the gut is critical for our well-being. And one of my favorite people, I can't think of the name of his book, he'd say, forget about the damn food. Concentrate on the types of bacteria you have in your gut, right? So that's the mission critical. You can do everything, but if you don't have fermented foods, right? Now, people are going to say, well, I don't like the smell, I don't this. Okay, that's another conversation, right? If you want to get to a better place, right? This is part of the work, right? Yeah. To me, it's norm to have a fermented food typically at every meal, right? That's right. Just a little bit.
I mean, it builds gut health. It has a natural biotic element to it. Yes. Now, when you get, there's a couple of things I want to bring up. We might as well go to this one. And that is my sleep. I can't sleep for beans. I mean, something you actually recommended to me works in a weird way. I listen to Gregorian chants. I put it on you go to YouTube and they have various Gregorian chants that can go on for like 3 or 4 hours. And it does put me to sleep. I just put it up on my smartphone, put it on my night table, and off I go. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you recommend generally for because I think we're all, particularly since the pandemic, I think most of us are dealing with insomnia.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Well, first of all, right, again, no medical training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It would seem judicious to have that checked, right? Now, mind you, I always say I have zero medical training. I can't give you a drug. I can't cut you. I can't make a diagnosis. I can't do any of that. But I suggested something to you. And here's what we know. Again, to me, it just makes sense, right? Right now, all of these lights in here, I would not typically have this, right? So humans for 99.99% of the time we've been on Earth, sun goes down, you go down, right? So what happens when you put artificial light to an algorithm of humans that have been going on for centuries? It screws things up. Now, if I suggest something with respect to lights for you, that's not how biology works, right? I tell you on Monday, and on Tuesday morning you call me and say, my sleep is amazing, Bryan. No, that's not the way it works. Normally, right, pitch black is the ideal. There's no light that sneaks in. I cover lights. My room is pitch black at night. I use red light. Red light doesn't seem to affect sleeping. And I'll use red light if I'm going to read a little bit. But typically, there's no light in here. I might watch TV, but the ideal is keep light or start decreasing the amount of light. Chronobiology, we should stop eating 3 to 4 hours before we go to sleep because that screws things up.
Right.
And honestly, it's something I failed to say in the beginning. When you talked about food, you've talked about many things, which is experiment. I don't know what the hell works for Chuck for the next 20 people. Yeah. Experiment, right? And you'll know something for you that Gregorian chant might drive somebody else batty.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
But I don't think so because there's something about that sonic that has effect on human beings. Well, how do you know that? They've been doing this stuff since the 12th century, and we're still listening to the damn things.
Yeah, it's something about it that it's I don't know if it's a pentatonic scale or what, but there is something. It is a sonic sound. Yeah. The other thing I've heard is magnesium is supposed to be good, but I don't know.
Magnesium is good for sleep?
Yeah.
I can't comment on the specifics. I mean, so here's what I will say. My response to any question with respect to the process of aging, it's complex, okay? It's complex, and the only thing that humans can tell with certainty about a complex system is you will have unexpected consequences, and the chances are good you do not know what those have. So if you're going to try something, let's just pretend you're right with the magnesium, right? Just pretend. Try a little magnesium, right? So try a small amount.
Right, take like one tablet.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but experiment because I can't tell you that. And you should know for you what's the most ideal. At least you know the Gregorian chants. Okay, this has some kind of effect on me. I would say Gregorian chants plus eye shades plus now if you have a spouse, you got to deal with, I want to make the room dark, honey. No, you can't do that. That's your argument. That's not mine.
Right.
So the room dark, cool temperature, 67, 66. Cooler temperatures have a more positive effect. Some of the experiments that I've done is to have a small fan blowing over. So cool rooms have a more positive effect on our sleeping. Heat, that just screws everything up. Now, depending on what you eat, so somewhere 70s or above.
No, I tend to like it cooler.
Yeah.
So yeah,
right.
that's helpful. What this is. I'm not trying to put you on the spot here because I understand that everyone is different, but I do like supplements sometimes. I don't take them regularly, but once in a while I do. I'll take them, and I'll take them for like a week, and then I won't take them. Do you have any opinions about supplements, vitamins, minerals, anything in particular?
The ideal, as would be expected, is real whole foods.
Right.
One. I won't comment on any specific supplements, and it's not putting me on the spot, but I will say, if a person thinks that they're going to get through the process of aging with eating, all this amazing organic food from wherever and drinking amazing water without getting a little boost from supplements, they're in for a rude awakening. Now, that's if you want to perform at a high level. If you're okay with what you've got and you don't want to experiment or think I'm going to throw away my money, that's cool. But I'm of the mindset, and I've been doing it. Yes, I take supplements. Yes, I'm always experimenting, because as the research changes, as the data and the results change, I'm going to adapt. I'm not doing the same stupid stuff I was doing 10 years ago. That's ridiculous.
Right.
But most people don't know what the latest research says. Saunas, where we've talked.
Yes.
The research shows that 20 minutes in a sauna at 180 degrees is approximately equivalent to 45 minutes of working out, right? So you raise your body temperature, you start sweating. So my take on that is, why would I go take a chance and get hurt lifting a weight, walking on the treadmill, anything else, when I could just sit there and approximate it close to 100%? Why would I do that, right? Well, somebody would say, that's so lazy. All you're doing is sitting there.
Right.
I promise you, if you stay in the sauna for a long time, your heart rate will go through the ceiling and you'll end up in the ER. That means you're overstressed it. So understanding that, that's what the research shows, right? But it's, to me, people might think it's so un-American. I mean, you have to work hard. I go, work smart to get a safe return on my investment. That's the way I look at it. If you want to go work out and take a chance on getting hurt, I'm not saying I won't do that, but if I can do this plus a little bit of the other, or the reverse, the research has shown if you go in and do a workout, challenge your body, elevate your heart rate, challenge your muscles, and then go into the sauna, you're getting double the bang for your buck.
Yeah, well,
right?
that's sort of what I do. Although I can't really tolerate the sauna too long, but I understand that it lowers blood pressure, and I do have a slightly elevated blood pressure. And I think that it's improved hugely since I started doing the sauna and the steam room. And then I do like a cold plunge in the shower stall. I don't know. I find that it's the hot to the cold. I do think that I haven't been sick since I started this. I mean, I might have had a slight cold, but normally I would have been very sick. So I think that it's having a very strong effect on my core strength.
It's a stress. Those are stressors, right? Cold, hot, right?
Mhm.
So here's the way I would think of it. I did an experiment a long time ago. So what kind of body is going to be able to handle a stressor, regardless of whether the stressor is psychological, physical, etc.? A body, right? Let's just take temperature as a stressor. A body who lives in the car, in the house, in the office building, maybe you walk outside, total cumulative, assuming you don't walk outside, 10 minutes, maybe 15, 20. But the rest of your hours are in a controlled temperature, let's say 68 to 72, right?
Mhm. Right.
So 4 degrees. I did an experiment whereby it was 24 below zero. Now I was riding a bike. So 24 below zero, and within the same 20-hour time frame, I went into a sauna, a banya, a Russian one, that was 220 degrees. So that means that I put my body through a stress level of about 240 degrees. So the question would be, which body do you think is going to be able to handle stress more? The one who went through 240 or 4 degrees, right? Now, does that make sense?
I'm not 100% sure I'm following you here.
Okay, so a body, anybody's human body,
Right.
they go through typically from one environment to the other, their car, their home, their office.
Sure.
And the temperature is, say, in all those places, excluding outside, 68 degrees to 72 degrees.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, it's consistent.
My experiment was a range of 240 degrees.
Right.
So which body do you think is going to be able to handle stress? Doesn't matter what the stress is, physical, emotional, etc. Inside, your body doesn't go, oh, I'm really sad because my girlfriend said this. At the stressful level is the stress. My hypothesis is, or what the research shows, is the body who went through 240 can handle more stress than the one who goes through 4 degrees.
I get it. And I think that, I mean, I personally, I think that I've experienced that and that I feel a lot less stressed since I've been doing this routine with the sauna, the cold plunge, you know, the back and forth temperature.
I would say it's a combination of everything. I would say it's not one thing. That wouldn't be fair to say, in my opinion.
I want to bring up one more thing because we're kind of reaching toward the end of the segment here. Usually after a while, people start losing their attention span. So I don't like to go too far over an hour, but men begin to lose testosterone at a certain age, and that's actually a serious health problem. It's not just a question of libido; it's a question of, you know, disease. I mean, you could become more susceptible to cancers and to heart disease. So it's a serious issue. How does an aging man preserve testosterone? I know that there are certain foods that I understand rob testosterone, including beer, apparently. What is your strategy generally for preserving and even improving testosterone levels?
Dr. Matthew Walker wrote a book, Why We Sleep, and he has a Google talk, and this is how he starts the Google talk. Men who sleep on average 6 hours or less have smaller testicles than men who don't, right? Okay. So the first thing, right, if you said that, your sleep. That'd be first, right? You got to get there. So that's not mine. That's Dr. Matthew Walker.
No, I mean, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and so, I can hear people saying, you know, well, that's hard. You know, it's hard being a good dad. It's hard, you know, making this. It's hard. Nobody said it was impossible. I go, if you decide it's impossible, or you say, you know, I don't want to do that, that's another conversation, right? The data is there. The research is there. I tell people this is hard. Get that into your head, and you can move forward.
So, Bryan, first of all, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chuck.
For joining me, for talking to me. I've learned a lot, and I'm continuing to learn a lot. You're one of these guys. I mean, at the gym, people view you as sort of a sensei. You know, you're like a wise.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, I mean, and you have all this wisdom. I hope that I would love to see you write a book or do a regular podcast, because I think that you're sharing, when you share it, you can make a difference beyond just a small circle of people, but through communication, you could change lives. You could change the world, really. So, you know, we could talk separately about how to do that, because I originally wanted to talk to you about that, but we should do that, you know, not necessarily live on the podcast itself.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, you've got a lot to say. I mean, you've got a lot of wisdom that I hope you share with everyone. Do you want to give out any information about people maybe reaching you for consultation or anything like that?
Sure. First will be my phone number, 857-231-1782. Second would be my email, HEBB as in boy, S as in Sam, LAW, hebslaw@gmail.com. And I'd love to just, you know, have a conversation.
You also, by the way, if I could add, you also have a LinkedIn page that people can use.
Yeah.
I
I have a
think
LinkedIn page, which I don't think of off the top of my head. Yes.
okay, Bryan Agurcia on LinkedIn. If you want to, because LinkedIn's huge. It's a great resource for me also. The show is live on LinkedIn, by the way. So, Bryan, I want to again thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the gym as always. And God
Thank you.
bless.